initially we reflected on the deeper intentions that really will bring new meaning and add more value to life. And further developing that, yesterday, Sister Usha spoke to us about and even took us into an experience of how valuing the self and experiencing that authentic and original aspect of the self can actually really give power to those deep and meaningful intentions that we might have created, so that we can actually sustain and hold on to those intentions. And in today's session, we're going to speak about how to sustain that energy that we're attempting to generate. A really, really wonderful way of sustaining energy is to engage in self-nurturing practices. Creating an intention, holding an intention, going deep into the self, feeling and experiencing the authentic aspects of the self is, for me, a lot about creation. And whatever it is, it's about planting seeds. And for me, whatever it is that has been created, especially the beautiful things, the most precious things, it needs to actually be cared for and nurtured in a very, very attentive way. And I simply love this term, nurturing. You know, sometimes our take on spirituality could be very, very disciplined, which is good. So we might be attempting to generate energy or even hold on to a rich energy by being a little bit hard on ourselves. Possibly because it's so important to us, and anything that's important to us, we tend to hold on. And sometimes, but in holding on too tight, there's almost a little bit of a strangulation effect. And the soul, in its original state, is very, very free, light, peaceful, sweet, filled with love. And I think the soul responds to handling and an approach that is of a similar nature. And so these self-nurturing practices with an approach whereby we're very gentle with the self. Gentle, yet not complacent. Not in any way am I sort of endorsing that we can be lackadaisical. Because part of nurturing and part of being gentle is to actually be focused, to be focused on the things that I know are good for me. And to be mindful of really dealing with, in the best possible way, anything that might come along in my journey, in my inner world, or in my external experience of the opposite nature. So self-nurturing practices, I see it as two levels. One are deep internal processes where I can really use my mind as my tool. And along with my mind, definitely, it always goes along with the heart, so using my thoughts and using my feelings, being very attentive so that I'm constantly in a state of self-monitoring. And when there's a state of self-monitoring, then there's self-regulation. We also call it in spirituality being that detached observer. of whatever internal process is occurring at any point in time. And so that's the internal process in using my thoughts and feelings. But secondly, and this is also a stamp and a mark of self-nurturing, is when I further translate it into actually doing things. Because just the act, I think, of taking the time and giving myself time and space to do something and develop that self-nurturing is actually self-nurturing itself, because I'm saying to myself that I'm important enough to take this time to engage in this practice. So coming back to the first aspect of detached observation, self-monitoring, self-regulation, I was touched by what Anne shared, because it seems like she's a mind reader. Because when I was planning what I was going to share, I was also going to be speaking about these triggers that come along the way. And of course, when these triggers come along the way, it does sort of activate certain memories. And sometimes, even if it's not memories, last week in the journaling exercises, Pratibha was referring to something called a chit internally, which is a memory track. And sometimes we might not consciously remember a memory, but a trigger can activate the reactions, attitudes, responses, and just general behavior that's associated with that original experience, from the past. And a huge part of self-nurturing, when that happens, and inevitably it's going to happen, because we are souls, yes, but we are in the body, and we are acting through the body, and we are interacting with others, and we are also navigating our way in contexts and situations. And so it's inevitable that this will occur. But the self-nurturing is in that moment, what do I do? A reflective practice, which is wonderful, is a little bit different, because that's maybe at the end of the day, wrapping up things. So, thinking about stuff, drawing the lesson from it, separating myself from blame, so that I can see where my personal responsibility lies, and then learning a lesson, making a decision, and charting my way forward. But self-nurturing for me is in the moment, what do I do? And I'll share with you, this is not textbook type of stuff. It's just stuff that I've used and I feel is simple and works for me. The first thing is to be very embracing, to be very accepting of the state that has overcome the self, whatever it might be, whether it's sadness, whether it's worry or anxiety, whether sometimes it's grumpiness and irritability, or sometimes in severe cases it might be anger. So to be accepting and embracing, because when there's no resistance and when there's that atmosphere of acceptance, I can hold a space that will allow for the release of that emotion. But resistance actually, for me, amplifies the experience, because on top of the resistance towards these negative emotions, I might be then sitting with guilt and shame and doubt, and we don't want to go into that downward spiral. So to be embracing and to be accepting, and to also acknowledge, hello, this is going on inside, yes, but it's fine. And then to observe whatever has been occurring around me. The eyes definitely saw something, possibly read a message or witnessed something. The ears definitely heard something, you know. And so through my sense organs, some sort of information was taken in and obviously triggered off things. So starting from the level of embracing my feelings, I can then ask myself, okay, feelings don't just come, instantaneously. It feels like that, but maybe unconsciously there was a thought pattern, obviously, that brought on these feelings. So sort of tracking back, which is what Sharad was saying. Yeah, life is about going forward, but about understanding it backward. So looking back and asking myself, giving myself the time and space to think, well, what am I really thinking here? And usually therein lies the key, lies the solution, because there's some aspect of my perception which has actually created those feelings. And when I'm able to pinpoint that level of perception, I can actually free myself from that pattern of thinking. And in freeing myself from that pattern of thinking, I'm then able to replace that, in a sense, dysfunctional perception with something more elevated. And with all of the spiritual knowledge that we have available and we're exposed to, there's definitely some rich, nourishing, and meaningful, pearl of wisdom that I can hold on to or draw upon to allow me to see that same situation, view that same message or whatever it might be in a different way. And when I replace that old way of thinking, then I can start to generate more stable feelings. And all of this actually happens very quickly. So when feelings are more stable, I can obviously then respond rather than react. And that response, for me, in the most empowering way, can be to communicate, But obviously, a stable response when it comes to communication is not going to be confrontational. It's really going to be friendly inquiry, or assertive communication that's very respectful of the other's space, whatever it might be. And so self-nurturing practice, because practice makes perfect. Everything that I've described, it took a length of time to describe, but actually it's a very quick process. And the more I engage in it, the more it actually becomes a familiar rhythm. And it can actually become a practice where I'm then an observer and I'm going through life so mindfully, really, really self-monitoring and self-regulating so that I'm not allowing my energy to deplete. I'm allowing all of that energy that I've been accumulating through my focused spiritual practices to be preserved and to also accumulate, which is fantastic. And so that's one level of self-nurturing, which for me is so vital. And I often ask myself this question: are you comfortable? And I check, and I encourage you to ask yourself this question through the day as well. And if the answer is no, it's okay, but it's good then because you can quickly, self-monitor and self-regulate to get back to that state of rest and comfort internally. I'd now like to invite Usha to speak to us about other self-nurturing practices which are in relation to this very reflective mode. When we were planning these sessions, she mentioned to me that she has the habit of journaling and that it assists her on a personal level a lot. And so I'm interested in hearing more about that, as I'm sure you would be. And Sister Usha, in addition to describing to us this journaling process, if you also want to share other self-nurturing practices that you might have in mind that sort of activate and awaken all of the good stuff internally and keep it there.
One thing that really feels like a powerful sense of being cared for is when you listen to. And part of our nurturing is that if we have someone who really takes the time to listen to us. But unfortunately, in this world, everyone is too busy, and you can't do it by paying somebody. But there's one very beautiful practice, and this is actually listening to your own self. And we can do that in many, many ways. But what is interesting is like Sister Devendra was saying, that if you're catching yourself and you're seeing, am I comfortable? So that is a checking in. But there may be times when I'm doing things and maybe there were just too many things. So I managed to check on a few things and certain other things just got left in. And so even though I didn't acknowledge them, they do get imprinted on my subconscious. So what happens is that I might not immediately react, but maybe later that will actually come up. And then that can be very hurtful. But if I have this practice where now this is not journaling in the morning, in the night, this is journaling in the morning. So the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is, you remember when you go to sleep, your subconscious actually has a chance to process. So all the things of the day would actually come to some kind of resolution. And so, if you take some time in the morning before you even brush your teeth, get out of your bed, um, if you're going to be disturbing people, I would suggest you just get out of bed, and the only thing you carry with you is your journal, and you just take your pen and you start to write. And the question you ask yourself is, how am I feeling? So you are directly connecting to your subconscious, which is you in the unconscious that has actually taken things on board. And by taking the time to actually listen to your feelings, because remember, the subconscious is now fully rewound itself from the day before, and it's actually very up there. And so when you ask that question, how am I feeling? You're going to actually be able to listen to the subconscious feelings. And I find that the most incredible thing, it's like you're able to catch the things that sometimes can feel overwhelming, or just because in the busyness of the time it slipped you. But that voice in the morning is so beautiful because it's not judging you, it's just letting you know how it feels. And if you want to, like, perhaps ask a question to yourself in the night and then go to sleep, and somehow even that question through the night with your subconscious will actually find some kind of way in which to give you some kind of way of resolving it. So this for me, I found, has been such a good friend. It is actually a practice in a book I read called The Artist's Way, and the actual process is called morning pages. And you need to write without stopping for at least 3 pages, answering this one question: how am I feeling? And sometimes you'll be writing stuff that feels like horrible, and say to yourself, I feel horrible writing it, or I feel this is useless writing it. But the idea is that you're acknowledging your feelings. You can really throw your toys out of the cot, but it's to yourself and you writing it. And as you let it out, what's amazing is that it's like you feel you have been heard. And that is perhaps the kindest thing we can do to ourselves, is to actually be heard. And for me, I think if that's you can go through a process, but a good start is to do it for at least 3-4 weeks at a time, or otherwise just whenever these things are happening, you can do it. So find at least an initial period to do it for a couple of days or a couple of weeks and see how it goes. Some people tell me, oh, it's a bit too much. But, to write for 3 pages means you're digging deep. And that's the level at which our subconscious sometimes stores things. So it's not an easy thing in a sense that it'll just happen overnight, but you are giving yourself a chance to be really listened to. I really find that for me, it's a very nice process and it's very encouraging as well. I don't have to wait to speak to anybody or go and find someone to share my ideas with, because when I'm listening to myself like that, I'm actually getting greater clarity, and it does allow me to access my real self even more clearer. Yeah, I think I like to stop there. It's for me a very useful thing. So 3 pages if you can. Don't punish yourself, but gently just give yourself that opportunity to emerge everything that has been stuck in the subconscious.
Wow, thank you. Dabbling with the unconscious sounds quite fascinating.
Yeah, because we don't realize that when things happen during the day, we know how to smile, we know how to say sorry, and we just move on because life doesn't actually wait for us. But the self has actually been somehow traumatized. Like how when you have a whiplash, there's that impact on the muscles even, and then later the pain comes about. So we also feel emotionally sometimes scarred by things which we don't have time to access. So it's so kind to be able to give time to listen to the self. So that's really deep nurturing for me.
Wonderful. Another aspect that I was very, very touched by is this whole very gentle process of listening and being heard. I really feel, especially because of the type of work I do and the experience I have all the time at work, um, I witness the level of healing that occurs when people really just feel embraced and held in a space because they've been given the freedom to speak from their heart without being judged, and they feel heard. And like Sister Usha was saying, not everyone has the privilege of being able to pay to go and have these sessions to be heard. And I think we are so fortunate because we really do have the tools to be able to do these things for ourselves, and always with the companionship of that great one, the divine source, who's constantly our partner and in many ways supporting our process of healing and process of transformation. So I'd like to actually close with a meditation. Where we're going to use another very creative process of enabling the self to be heard, and just follow the words, because it's a bit difficult to explain, but I think as we go through the process you'll get to sort of experience what it is to nurture the inner child. In front of me, in my mind's eye, the most recent scene of disturbance flashes through the screen of my mind, but just for a few seconds. And the moment I re experience this scene, already I'm remembering those feelings and the thoughts that flooded my mind. Now I see myself like I used to be long ago. This image of a little child. It's actually quite beautiful to receive this vision of this little one that I used to be. I'm noticing the face, the hair, the playful clothing, maybe bare feet, holding something in my hand. And I find myself entering into a room. Not feeling that great. For those few moments that disturbing scene flashed in front of the eyes, it impacted on me. I noticed that at the window in this room, there's a very warm, comfortable, soft couch. So I climb up onto this couch, sitting at the window, and much to my delight, someone else enters this room. I see myself in duplicate, but this form seems to be a very stable, wise, mature, kind, and gentle version. Like an experienced mentor. And it feels really good to see myself in this form as well. Taking a seat next to the little child. Shifting my focus onto myself being the little child. As soon as I experienced the presence of this very, very kind, mature adult mentor, everything starts to pour out of me. I don't hold back. All the complaints, all the fears, the whole story, every detail. No need for me to censor, no need for me. I'm a child. I don't even know how to do those things. No filters, just raw information in the way I saw it, in the way I heard it, the way I'm thinking, and the way I'm feeling. And all the time that I'm allowing this flood to pour out, I feel safe. My wise mentor just listening carefully. I see no judgment. I see no reaction. I'm not being stopped. I'm not being interrupted. I'm not even receiving advice. It's just not a tap on the knee, a pat on the shoulder from time to time. So I ask this wise one, do you believe me? What do you think? And all I hear back is a validation of my feelings. No agreement or disagreement about the situation. Just an acknowledgement of the state I'm in. And I start to feel a release. Somebody understands. So I find myself asking this question. Maybe that's not exactly the way it was. Maybe I'm missing something. And my wise mentor just reflects. So, do you feel that you might be missing something? Nothing more. And now it's becoming clearer to me. I'm able to put things in perspective. I'm able to see a little bit more of the bigger picture. I'm able to see parts of myself that are strong, that can't be crushed by this situation. And suddenly, it just feels to me like the situation is not as big as I initially thought it might be. I'm big, not the situation. And so I share with my wise mentor. This is what I know about myself. And I think now I know how to handle it. And once again, all that my wise mentor does is gaze lovingly at me, smile, and affirm, reflecting back in similar words the things that I'm saying about who I am and how the situation is not as big as me. I now have this newfound confidence. I lean across to my wise mentor, pass on a tight hug, and I'm ready to trot out of this room and go back to being my carefree, happy, and contented self. Shanti. Apologies, I think I went slightly over time. So